here 5 years. There's been no charges, and here I am going after somebody who's had some struggles with addiction, drugs, prostitutes,
Heroin,
family
crack.
members. Yeah, yeah. So
Not light drugs. We're talking about the serious stuff.
I'm loath to talk about the Jim Comer House Oversight Committee investigation or anything Jim Jordan's doing. Um, any details we get from wire transfers and suspicious activity reports from banks. Any comments we get from former Hunter Biden business partners. Any questions about Hunter Biden's lack of experience in sectors he was being paid a lot of money to operate within: energy, finance, and how uh, both his father and senior level members of this administration, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, Mike Morrell, former acting director of the CIA, any role they may have had in providing cover for Biden politically in the context of a campaign, anything they may have been doing to advance Hunter Biden's business interests, and Hunter Biden's business interests being used to serve the financial interests of, what are we up to, 9 members of the Biden family? I'm
Could be
low.
as many as
I
12.
don't want to talk about any of that. I'm afraid to talk about any of that because I don't want Juan Williams to think I'm mean and that I'm targeting Hunter Biden, just a young man, 52, struggling with addiction. For more on this, I'm gonna have to enlist somebody else to do this dirty work who's not as nice as I am. Pleased to be joined by Kevin Brock. He's former assistant director of intel for the FBI and former principal deputy director for the National Counterterrorism Center. Kevin, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Dan and Amy. I'm not sure I'm being compared to you as being not as nice as you. That's
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have to play this role. I didn't realize how antagonistic I had been to this poor
to Juan.
to the first son there. Well, to Juan and to the first son. I don't want to be lacking in empathy for somebody struggling with addiction. But apparently that is not a concern for, I don't know, the senior level IRS official who's blown the whistle on disparate treatment of Hunter Biden, or concerns about the FBI spiking an investigation to Hunter Biden, or at least an attempt to do so. So, maybe you can pick it up from there because since we haven't had any indictments, I'm told by Juan Williams, and he represents sort of the general viewpoint on the left, that there's nothing to see here.
Yeah, and there's a sense of disappointment too when you hear that what's being considered are tax charges or falsifying a gun registration application. Seems a little anticlimactic when the grave concern that remains, the unanswered question is, did Hunter Biden use his father to gain access to business in China in exchange for favorable treatment of Chinese interests by the Biden family, whether in or out of office, and does that continue today? These are the big questions that need to be answered, and I'm not sure if they're ever going to be answered, but that's the most disturbing issue. And then, as you pointed out, Dan, coupling that with an effort by CIA executives, it was a CIA operation from the get-go 3 years ago, or in October of 2020, almost 3 years ago, to give top cover to Joe Biden on the whole laptop issue by getting 51 former, mostly CIA executives to sign a letter claiming that the laptop had, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation, which it didn't. None of those executives worked substantially in any kind of counterintelligence role or had that expertise. That's the jurisdiction of the FBI. I worked it for many years. Preloading a laptop with false emails and pictures of Hunter Biden, and then dropping it off at some obscure computer store in Delaware, and expecting that person to turn it over to the FBI and Rudy Giuliani is a long shot. Would have been a long shot strategy of the Kremlin, They just don't operate that way. So we know, we knew from early on that this was a lie to claim that it had all the earmarks of a Russian information operation. I wrote about that back in October 2020, and lo and behold, Michael Morell has done us the service of testifying to that fact, that it was surely, as it was called back then.
But it took years for them to come clean.
It took 3 years, yes.
Well, and now we know Blinken was involved in as well, which shouldn't be a surprise, but it's always good to know for certain. But here's the thing. So the CIA meddled in the election. All this election meddling. Russians, the CIA meddled in the election. The FBI, an FBI agent, is meddling into an investigation into Hunter Biden. We believe that CIA agent Thibault that suddenly retires once he's outed. We got an IRS whistleblower saying that there's meddling going on at the IRS with respect to review of Hunter Biden's tax filings. I mean, why should we have any trust in any of these agencies?
And not only that, I mean, the FBI takes some deserved criticism on the handling of the laptop investigation, although they do have a legitimate claim to say, look, it's an ongoing investigation. We get that part. But we're also getting indications that the U.S. attorney in Delaware, who is prosecuting this investigation, is getting slow-rolled by the Department of Justice. The FBI can investigate all day long. If the prosecutors aren't going to prosecute, then the case isn't going to be heard, and nobody's going to know anything about it. And apparently they're running into headwinds from U.S. attorneys sitting in other districts. And the U.S. Attorney Weiss in Delaware, we don't know to the extent how aggressive he's being as well. He's characterized as a Trump appointee, but he was originally appointed as U.S. Attorney under Obama back in the 2012 in that time frame, back in his administration. So, we just don't know all the answers right now, and it looks like a lot of slow rolling going on, and that's got to be considered unacceptable.
I mean, do you have any conclusions that you've drawn or things that you suspect based on your professional background, former assistant director of Intel for the FBI? That's a big job. And everything that we've seen and everything that you've heard and things that are now in the public domain. I mean, is Jim Comer right when he says, look, or even Jonathan Turley, George Washington law professor, talk about classic earmarks. This has all the classic earmarks of a old-fashioned influence peddling operation. There's no business that they're getting paid to operate, so it's by definition their individual access apparently is what's being paid for, and the why and the when and the why and the when, I guess, is there's still some question about that. But is there anything confusing about what's going on here to you?
No, of course it's influence peddling. It's if Hunter's name was Schwartz, he wouldn't have gotten any of those contracts out of China. The only reason he got that business is because he's a Biden and he had direct access to his father, who at the time was vice president, then was out of office, now is back in office. It was a brilliant strategy by the Chinese to co-opt Hunter with an infusion of millions of dollars of money for services that are inchoate at best, so talk about classic earmarks. It has all the classic earmarks of an influence peddling operation.
And then if you're investigating this, next steps would be things like, well, if they were operating like foreign agents, then they have to register. They have to register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act and so forth. So then you start to, put the case together. If this is how they were operating, then there are some rules and regulations they have to follow. Did they follow them? And if they didn't follow them and they purposely avoided them to avoid disclosure, then we have a criminal case here.
That's an excellent point, Dan. And you look at Crossfire Hurricane was started as a Foreign Agent Registration Act violation case with no indication that anybody in the Trump campaign had failed to register as a foreign agent or even acted as a foreign agent. But you have Hunter Biden conducting all of this business where he would legitimately be required under the law to register as a foreign agent. I'm not clear on the evidence as to whether he did or didn't in this regard. We don't hear much about it. You would think that would be part of the investigation out of Delaware. But that there's certainly more substance and more reasonable suspicion surrounding his failure to act in that regard than there was anybody in the Trump campaign.
Yeah, your perspective as a former FBI, as well as I'm sure you keep in contact with former colleagues as well. I mean, is there concern about the implications of this two-tiered system of justice based on one's political beliefs? We could see Trump indicted at least 3 times between now and the Iowa caucus, and meanwhile, there's nothing seemingly going on with respect to this Biden incorporated influence peddling operation, even as evidence mounts and whistleblowers pile up and agencies are implicated. Is there an appreciation for where this could go if it goes off the rails?
I can assure your listeners that there is tremendous anxiety within the ranks of the FBI right now for everything you just articulated. This is not what people signed up for. They do not enjoy the current demonization of the FBI that's occurring because of all of this. It's making their jobs harder. They can't gain the cooperation that they used to be able to gain from ordinary citizens, which is vital to FBI success and the safety of the nation. This has been tremendously upsetting. The decisions by a few in the FBI to pursue improperly predicated investigations or to pursue strategies and tactics against individuals that look biased on their face has created tremendous angst inside the FBI. This is not what most agents want to see, and it's unfortunate that some of these things have occurred. There is an opportunity. I'm actually writing an article on this right now. Jim Jordan has an opportunity here, a short window, but he has an opportunity for true reform in the FBI based on what we've seen on the surface over the last 3 or 4 years. But what we're getting is a lot of politics right now. We want to see more substance out of that committee. We know what the whistleblowers have said. He can subpoena all kinds of records from the FBI, which will take months and months to get. We already know there's enough there to invite serious consideration for reform that everyone will be happy with, even FBI agents. Let's get going. Instead, right now, it's just political showmanship.
Yeah, I mean, what will it take? Is that what it's going to take to change the culture there, and not to have FBI agents, act as political powerhouses for the government?
Yeah, Amy, it'll take the kind of reform that makes sure that rogue management in the FBI can't start investigations based on research by political opposition research by an opposing campaign. It'll take away the ability to make a decision to do an early morning full tactical arrest on a pro-life demonstrator who's already offered to turn himself in.
I know.
How did that happen? So it'll take reforms that'll prevent those kinds of decisions from becoming commonplace, and that can be done. It can be done. Those reforms can be put in place. Those guardrails, those bumper pads, and agents will welcome that.
And why isn't Christopher Wray advancing those ideas?
Well, I hope he is. If he is, he's doing it quietly, and that frustrates people. We'll see. I don't know.
Kevin Brock, former Assistant Director of Intel for the FBI, former Principal Deputy Director of the National Counterterrorism Center as well. Kevin, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's good talking with you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
We live in a high-tech world, yet nature is so complex that it's impossible for humans to even come close to duplicating it with all the technology in the world. Witness the spectacular things we see in nature and how they should inform one's faith in the latest book by Jeff Tischler, High Tech versus the Highest Tech. This 78